Hello everybody, welcome back to my book vlog. Today we are discussing what I consider to be one of the most important books of 2017, and I know many others out there agree with me. We're going to chat about Reni Eddo-Lodge's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Now, I have a newsletter, a tiny letter. If you want to sign up for it, it's tinyletter.com/the written word. I know, amazing title. But I send out a monthly newsletter, and at the end of 2017, I did a wrap up of my favourite books. And unequivocally, Reni Eddo-Lodge's, we can clearly call it seminal book, easily made the list. Not only is it a fantastically written and desperately needed book, but it caused a rightful sensation when it was published. The reason why I'm talking about it now is that the paperback version has just been published in March 2018. So I'm hoping this book makes it more affordable for people who want to read it, and also brings this book to a far wider audience because it is desperately necessary. Okay, so what is it about? Back a few years ago, Reni Eddo-Lodge wrote a blog called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And in this blog post, she talked about her frustration in getting British white people in particular to acknowledge white privilege and to acknowledge the systemic and institutional racism, not only that is current in British society, but that has also been historic as well. Now, this book was built on the top of that blog. And of course, even though the title and the cover is phenomenal, this is a book that's very much aimed at white people, and rightfully so. Reni really focuses on British black experience. So she comes at this from an angle that whenever we talk in contemporary society about black experience, it is heavily dominated by American black experiences, whether that's Black Lives Matter, whether it's the sort of police killings in the States. And this has a double effect, is one, not only does it erase black British experience in particular, but it also gives the inference that America's racism is more severe, is more prevalent than British racism. And effectively, it's letting white British people off the hook. So this book starts with a potted and brilliant history of black people in the UK, from the white British involvement in the slave trade right up to present day, with the corruption in the police force, whether that's about Stephen Lawrence's trial of Stephen Lawrence's killers and other very obvious racist incidents, particularly around the sort of race riots that happened in London and across the UK. And really what she's bringing out is that racism is sadly alive and well in the UK. And she takes this foundation and she builds on it to explain concepts such as white privilege. What is white privilege? What is the everyday privilege that a British white person has over every person of colour, every time they go out in society, every time they exist? And she also talks about, which I really love, is called Fear of the Black Planet, where scaremongering in the press and racism builds up into this fear that white people are going to be a minority in the next 20 years, that others, black people, immigrants, are going to take over the UK and we're no longer going to be a Christian white country. That fear of a black planet, fear of a black kingdom, and just how that feeds insidiously into our idea of race here in the UK. This is an amazing book. Not only is it extremely well written, I believe passionately that this book really should be on school curriculums, because Reni does an extraordinary job in laying out to us what we should already know as fact. And beyond that, she also talks about possible action and possible community action needed to address this. And firstly, that is, white people must acknowledge that they have this privilege and this structural racism in the UK, and that we must work to eradicate it and remove it. But she also talks very interestingly about feminism, and how white feminism very much focuses on just sort of seems to minimize the needs of women of color, and also looks at class and other issues in feminism. And she's very clear that if feminism is truly intersectional and is truly going to be about all women, then it falls to feminism to look at eradicating racism, eradicating poverty, eradicating discrimination, eradicating socio-economic barriers, because unless that is the case, then feminism truly isn't working for all women. I absolutely adored this book. It sounds heavy. It really isn't. It is superbly well written. You never get bogged down. Reni's writing is insightful. It is very easily accessible. There's nothing intimidating in the language about this book. It's super easy, super accessible, and a wake-up call to a nation in denial. That is absolutely what this book is about, and it is so fantastic in a world where we are dominated with black stories from overseas, particularly the States, that we have a book here that puts British black experience front and center, and hugely informative, hugely revealing, and rightly an absolute sensation. Reni Eddo-Lodge, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.